I'm finally done.
It was a long read, but it was worth it.
And now for the pendulum effect. Chapter 1.
Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, back again with another episode of 10-Minute Testing. Now some of you may have seen my stream this week and felt my pain in trying to make Endymion work. Well, I'm happy to report that I've got something playable completely courtesy of another person. This is a win-win for both of us. You don't have to sit through my tier 50 ratios, and I get to deflect every criticism I receive. So without further ado, I present Endymion Spellbooks. So here's the list, and okay, that's significantly less bad cards than I expected. As always, I'll give you a little bit of background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and of course, the card by card. Before we begin, however, the entirety of this deck can be attributed to Halfmiss, Halfmiss number 2438 on Discord and u/Halfmiss on Reddit, who is my sponsor in my 12-step program to literacy. They are responsible for the deck's content, and they are the first person you should hit up should you have questions. I promise they'll be more informative than I am, though anyone familiar with my comments section could probably have told you that already. So firstly, for those of you that don't know, Endymion the Founding Sorcerer Supreme is Konami's recent foray into young adult fiction. It tells the story of one of the most powerful sorcerers of all time and his ongoing struggle to find a list reasonable enough for his bloated ass to squeeze into. This behemoth of a book appears in a new structure deck alongside a new wave of mediocre support, one searcher, one card that special summons from the deck, and then a cavalcade of background characters that range in usefulness from basically just a pendulum scale to pitch black Power Stone with downside. It's a sad story for the Sorcerer Supreme, as his own effect is insane. He's able to, in the Pendulum Zone, wipe the board, and on field, negate spells and traps while maintaining an invulnerability to targeting or destruction. A significant amount of existing Endymion testing has gone one of two ways. Either as a board-building deck that scales into setups that are outclassed by Pendulum, or as a pure deck that excels against Rogue, but can't put a chip into anything competent since a third of their cards are mana batteries. The unfortunate truth is that this deck-building approach is misguided. Endymion is not efficient enough to raise the ceiling on existing Pendulum strategies, and his pure archetypal cards can't hold weight on their own. He needs some sort of extremely efficient engine that tends to play a lot of spell cards in one turn, can cycle through a majority of the deck with ease, and has a distinct lack of playable cards so he can slot in. Enter Spellbooks. Spellbooks do a lot of specific stuff for the strategy that nothing else can. They don't interfere with Master Cerberus, as Pendulum decks tend to. They have no problem finding draw spells with their generic link to, and they cycle through Secret's Master Fate with shocking efficiency. The deck's prowess isn't in board building, it's in board breaking. Fate's an incredibly powerful tool. It doesn't target nor does it destroy. Master Cerberus is routinely at max stacks in our tribal spell deck, and its plays are extremely resilient to interruption. This is the perfect home for the Founding Sorcerer Supreme, a chewy, sticky mid-range deck that ends counter wars with an untargetable conditional negate that floats into additional linear plays. The strategy is already starting to show up in the OCG, but I'm of the opinion that Halfmiss's ratios are much better researched than day one builds from the officials. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First, we've got the Endymion pieces, 1 Sorcerer and 3 Servant. After that are the Mythical Beasts, 3 Master Cerberus, 2 Jackal, and 1 Garuda, who has synergy with Endymion as a surprise return target. Finally, we've got 3 Blue Boy and 3 Ash Blossom. For spells, we're on 3 Spell Power Control and Everything Searcher for Endymion Sorcerers, a small Sky Striker package of 3 Engage, a Hornet Drone, and a Widow Anchor. It'll either draw us an obscene amount of cards or proc a lot of spell counters. After that, we've got a books package of 3 Secrets, 2 Knowledge, 1 Master, 1 Fate, 1 Life, and 1 Tower. Don't get too scared at one-ofs. Spellbooks is all about assembling groups of 3 spellbooks with different names that secretly all do the same thing. Finally, we've got 3 Instant Fusion, 3 Called by the Grave, and 1 Upstart Goblin. In the extra deck, we've got the Restricts plus Winda for an involved combo that ends with an onboard Special Summon Floodgate turn 1, Boral Sword, Ambro Whale, Nightmare's Unicorn, and Phoenix, A-Lister to make off of Hornet tokens and Kagari to link up into Crowley, the Origin of Prophecy. After that is Daybreaker the Magical Knight. Hey, he holds counters, okay? Kagari, Hayate for time, don't slow play kids, Link Haribo, and Salamangreat Almirage for corner cases. So with that, let's jump into the games. Our first match is up against UA, a deck that I wish was just a little bit better, but serves an important purpose for this video, as it's one of the very few decks that can consistently assemble a boss monster larger than Endymion. We're going first, and our opener is pretty good. We're going to start by setting this copy of Servant of Endymion, then activating Hornetbit to get a copy of a token to our side of the board, and a spell counter onto our servant. We'll go into Kagari and fire off Hornetbit again to get another token and another counter, finally ending with a copy of Spell Power Grasp. How's that for counting? She now has 4, so we'll go into her and Big Endymion Boy. They both get a counter. We'll activate Master Cerberus to get Jackal to hand, and we need that extra monster zone freed. So we'll go into a copy of Alistair, a copy of Crowley. Crowley's going to get a copy of Spellbook of Knowledge. We'll activate Spellbook of Secrets to get a Master. We'll activate Jackal's Effect to get Cerberus back in the EMZ. Then we'll activate Master to get a copy of Fate to hand. We'll fire off this copy of Knowledge, and we'll set the Fate and the Called, passing it back to our opponent. Unfortunately, our opponent has a great piece of disruption against us, a Twin Twisters, that will force the Endymion activation incredibly early. They will then Signing Deal, and not knowing what they have in hand, I figure I might as well Fate now. That unfortunately turns out to be a bad decision because they have both Foolish Burial Goods to use Penalty Box to get Stadium and Midfielder. They'll normal summon a copy of Midfielder, getting Dreadnought Dunker, and equip him with the shirt. Oh boy, I am prepared to get dunked. They attack, dealing 2,400 points of damage and destroying, well, Master Cerberus is actually invulnerable, but at least Endymion. Endymion will float into a copy of Spellbook of Secrets, and they're able to clear our board afterwards. We draw for turn, and we should be able to win from this position. Remember, Servant does not necessarily have to get Endymion. We will use her in this specific scenario to get a copy of Mythical Beast Master Cerberus, who does have a removal effect. We'll activate Spellbook of Secrets, then we'll normal summon this copy of Blue Boy. We'll get a copy of Spellbook of Knowledge, set Tower, then use Master Cerberus' effect to banish this copy of Dreadnought Dunker, activate Spellbook of Knowledge, get in for 5,300 points of damage, then in main phase 2 go into a Nightmare Phoenix to clear the field. We'll activate Startup Engage afterwards, find a piece of Disruption and an Ash Blossom, and pass it back. Our opponent will normal summon a copy of Midfielder, we'll activate Widow Anchor, and they'll concede. Our second match is up against True Draco, and this really showcases this deck's ability to cycle through a significant enough portion of the deck to find all of the requisite parts. We're going first, and we'll start up our turn with a Startup Engage. We'll get ourselves a copy of Hornetbit from deck, then activate Hornetbit for a token, go into Kagari, activate Hornetbit again for a second token, before normal summoning a copy of Spellbook Magician of Prophecy, getting ourselves a copy of Master, activating Secrets, activating Master, and ending with basically everything we could ever want in our hand. We'll activate Knowledge, and ooh, we find Servant, but unfortunately we have no way to activate her this turn. We can get a little cheeky if we get lucky off Crowley, but we don't, so we'll set Fate and Called. Our opponent will normal summon, oh god, a copy of Inspector Border. We do have a Link monster, which is something, and we should have Pendulums for the future. When they go to activate Diagram, I figure, yeah, this is the best Fate target in the deck, so we'll go ahead and banish it. Afterwards, they will attack into our Crowley, deal 1,000 points of damage to us, set a card, and pass it back. Things are looking pretty good, especially because our Servant is active, and we're able to draw an additional card off of this copy of Tower. We're going to start by activating, Widow Anchor. That's a sweet draw. Unfortunately, our opponent is going to Tribute in response, getting themselves a copy of Dynamite Knight. That gets a True King's Return to their side of the field. We can pop off getting ourselves a copy of Endymion. They activate, there can be only one. I'll negate it. They'll Tribute Summon, but you can't target with the grave effect of True King Return because Endymion has targeting protection. They're forced to blow up their own monster. We'll activate Master Cerberus, activate King Jackal to bring back Master Cerberus, normal summon a copy of Blue Boy, and they'll concede. Alright, so it's time for game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta. Our opponent is on Salamangreat. I mean, there's a Spinny in the hand, so it has to be Salamangreat, but it's looking a little more like Phantasmaze Tribal. We're going first, which is great news for us. We're going to start with the Spell Power Grasp. That's going to get a Servant to hand. We'll set the Servant, activate Startup Engage for a copy of Hornetbit. We'll activate Hornetbit for a token, go into a Kagari, and we need it to resolve. So after they activate Phantasmaze, we'll activate Ash Blossom. Oh, but they have an Effect Veiler. That means we'll have to set this Garuda to get our Servant to 3, but we can do so, and that means we do have access to Endymion. We can pass back to our opponent, defenses up. They're going to draw for turn. What do they find but a Pot of Desires? With perfect information, we know we should be negating this with Endymion, but I felt it greedy in the moment. They're going to go into a copy of Gazelle, setting a copy of Roar and Spinny, going into Mirage Stallion, into Jack Jaguar, into Sunlight Wolf, using Mirage Stallion's effect to tuck the Kagari, and then going into Jack Jaguar again, triggering Sunlight Wolf, going into second Sunlight Wolf, getting back a copy of Roar, setting 3, and passing it back. We're going to start by activating the effect of Garuda, fishing for a Roar. We don't find it. Bet you didn't know it had a scale effect. We'll get a Roar with a Spell Power Grasp activation. We get to attack into a Sunlight Wolf, and suddenly they're out of Sunlight Wolves. We could do this. They draw a Foxy. They'll use Foxy's effect, and what do they find but a Gazelle? Not a big deal because we know they have a Gazelle in hand. They'll go into a Valence that triggers the Gazelle in the hand and allows them to add a Sanctuary to hand. Afterwards, they will activate Gazelle's effect to send a copy of Falco, so they can recycle a copy of Roar, then activate Jack Jaguar. They activate Spinny, and we activate Called by the Grave just to get Roar number 2'd. They go into a copy of Sunlight Wolf, trigger the effect of Sunlight Wolf, use the effect of Mirage Stallion, and our old nemesis! Oh god, okay, so Borreload Dragon can actually get over Endymion. We float into a copy of Spellbook of Secrets. We'll go ahead and activate it, getting ourselves a copy of Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. We get a copy of Knowledge that allows us to go into Instant Fusion into Thousand Eyes Restrict. That's another spellcaster for Crowley. We'll activate Crowley's effect. They'll activate Phantasmaze. That's fine, all according to plan. We'll get a copy of Fate Two Hand. We'll activate Master Cerberus's effect for a copy of Jackal. Use Jackal's effect to get back Master Cerberus and start activating spells. We'll start with Life, and then afterwards we'll go into a copy of Splendid Magical Knight for the extra counter, activate Fate, and as long as they don't activate the effect of Borreload Dragon in response, we could win. But because they do, we unfortunately are not able to walk over the Phantasmaze. Then, of course, they can pop off with Gazelle. We'll attack into the Gazelle and hope for the best, but, I mean, they do have a Phalanx in Graveyard, so they can just protect it. We'll concede. Alright, so it's time for game 2, and our opponent's opener is much better than last time. Ours is almost exactly the same. While we do have the setup tools that we need to pop off, we also have a copy of Called by the Grave to stop any errant hand traps. We'll start by activating Spell Power Control to get a copy of Servant. We'll activate Servant to get a copy of Hornet Bit to our hand and the token to our side of the board. We'll activate Kagari and the one hand trap you can't called. Well, we'll go into Hayate, set 2 cards, and pass it back. Our opponent draws Phantasmaze for turn. Glad that wasn't in the opener. We're going to activate Ash Blossom in response to Lady Debugger, but they have a called of their own, which means they're going to be able to resolve it. Getting a copy of Gazelle to hand, activating Phalanx's effect, activating Sanctuary, going into a second Phalanx so they can trigger the Gazelle in hand, using Gazelle's effect to send a Spinny to graveyard, and we can now activate our called, banishing the Spinny. So they can't pop off all the way. We have exactly 1 turn to do what we want. We'll use Hayate to send a card that we don't want to draw, and then for turn we'll draw. Oh, Ash is pretty good. Thankfully, Servant is at 3, so we can go into Endymion. They both get a spell counter. We'll go to Battle Phase, but unfortunately for us, they do have Phalanxes in Graveyard this time. Our opponent draws an Effect Veiler for turn. They're going to start by normal summoning a copy of Falco to return this copy of Gazelle. They'll then go into Heat Leo, shuffling our set card, and then Reincarnation summon Heat Leo, though our Endymion can't be targeted. Our Servant's effect will trigger, but it gets roared. That's bad news for us because in order to be good, Endymion needs a monster that can have spell counters put on it to return. Because it doesn't have that, we're kind of sunk right now. When they go to activate Gazelle, we'll Ash, they activate Called, and we need to negate it or we lose. So we return Endymion. Yikes. From this position, our opponent is able to pop off. They'll go into a copy of Wolf, special summon a copy of Gazelle. We have to draw pretty broken right here in order to remain in the game. And what do we find for our turn after taking a significant amount of damage? Oh, that won't do it. Okay, that's the end of the game. So we're back, and there's a lot to think about from these. As always, let's take a look at the pros and the cons. First, the pros. 1, it is certainly the best version of Endymion I've tested. It's free for most of the exceptionally frustrating nombos of the Magician lists and the Pure builds, and the individual pieces of the deck supplement each other immensely well. 2, while setups don't look particularly frightening, they can be deceiving. This deck is perfectly capable of presenting 3 pieces of conditional negation. Endymion's actually a pretty good boss, and I'm not known to compliment bosses often. And 3, the backup plan is, at the very least, competent. With only 6 actually good Endymion cards, it's important that this deck functions properly without them, and I'm happy to say that it does. Even if you're locked into a book play turn 1, the repeatability of the engine means a top-decked Servant is probably live turn 3 anyway. And the cons. 1, it struggles immensely against Borreload Dragon. Now this is kind of the death knell of the rogue deck. Everyone's second favorite load dropper will routinely drop a steaming one right on you. 2, it's kind of just bad Salamangreat. They're both disruptive strategies that play extremely well through hate, but one of them can assemble lethal in less than 4 turns. Unless we lose the Gazelle or the Wolf, it's hard to make a case for this playstyle in a deck that doesn't involve fiery furries. And 3, it ain't budget. I mean, the striker portion of the deck is extremely critical to its success, and you're going to be hurting without repeatable spells. I can't exactly, convince the majority of you to drop $150 on a glorified Toon Table of Contents for this strategy, so I won't try to. All in all, it's an extremely interesting deck that will be interesting to watch evolve as its superiors are nerfed in upcoming lists. I recommend it if you have a strong affinity for sorcerers, or if you're sick of slamming salamanders together. So that's that. Once again, this deck was dreamed up by, and this list was tuned by, Halfmiss, whose contact information will be in the description. If you want to see me play the decks I make on this show on stream, I'm on twitch.tv/mbtygo every Monday from 7 to 9 Eastern Standard Time. And if you have an idea for a deck or archetype you want to see on a future episode of this show, let me know in the comment section below and I'll do my best. Otherwise, I'll see you Saturday.